Hi everybody, thanks for joining me here today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to use a common instrument in groundwater hydrology, and that's what is called informally an E-tape, but actually technically I think it's called an electronic water level sounder. This handy little device here is extremely useful for getting water levels to wells, or depth to water level in wells. And so the things you have to know about it are that you put it in the well. When it touches water, there's going to be a little beep that goes off that's going to let you know it touches water, and that allows you to know how deep it is from some measuring point all the way down to water in the well. So you need to understand these are somewhat delicate instruments, and so you want to be very careful how you handle it. Don't pull on it, twist it, sharply bend the tape because you don't want to break the wires inside. And you want to be careful about how you use it. So the first thing when you're going to get ready to use it is you'll notice there's a small knob here. On most E-tapes there's a small knob you can turn, and that changes the sensitivity, so you want to make sure your E-tape is on when you get ready to use it. You'll also see on most E-tapes there's a little button, and you can push that button to see if it makes a beep. There's also often a light, and you'll see on this one, you probably can't see it very well, but there is a small light here, and that also serves as a signal that you've touched water, or in this case, that your test is working. Okay, if you don't hear a beep, your light doesn't go on, it's likely that your battery is dead. There can be other problems as well, but the dead battery is the most common. Also be aware that on one of our E-tapes, the light and the test button don't work, so that's something to watch out for as well. But usually you can just check with the button to see if things are working right. Now I'm going to measure water level in this well, and if I were actually out here collecting data, the first thing I would do is start writing in my scientific notebook, say what well am I working on. This particular well is T16D, and then once I would get my notes all ready, I'm going to take off this protector cap. And one thing to notice here, you should always look inside the cap, be a little cautious, because particularly in these wells out here in our well field, it's very common to get the hornet nests. So yellow jackets will build their nest inside here. You shouldn't have any problem with that because I've gone around and sprayed all these wells, but it's always something to keep in mind. Now inside, this is called the conductor casing. The main job of this casing is to keep the well safe. In case somebody, for instance, were to back their truck up, it would damage this outer casing, but not actually, hopefully, break the PVC liner inside the well casing. And then we have a cap. In this case, we're very fortunate because there's a little pull on top of this cap, and it's easy for us to take it off. If the cap isn't, or if there isn't a pull on the cap, it's a lot more difficult with these wells. You have to get in there with your hands and kind of slowly work it off. It's not that easy to do. And so the kind of corollary to that is when you put the caps on the well, particularly if it doesn't have a pull, when you put it back on, please be very careful about how you put it on. Don't jam it down, don't put it in, twist it off to one side, but just very carefully work that cap off and work it back on down, being careful not to get it stuck. Okay, in this well, there's the conductor casing here, there's a PVC liner down inside the casing, and we're going to measure depth to water inside that PVC liner. But one thing is we need to establish a datum that we're going to use over and over again every time we measure the water level in this well. And in this well, I use this there's a little knob right here on the side, and it's right above the locking hasp here. And I always measure to that datum. So I'm going to get my E-tape ready. I'm going to make sure it's turned on. I'm going to check it. Seems to be working great. I'm going to put the sonde in. Notice that there's a little break here, so I'm going to take that break off. I'm going to put the sonde in the well. Okay, you can see here when I put it in the well, I'm not going to allow the tape to drag on the edge of the casing here. I'm going to put it directly into the well. Then I'm going to lower it down until it beeps. Okay, so there you can see tit water. And I'm going to check, and you can see here that I'm reading the water surface is 7, so there's a 7 in red. Black numbers are tenths, so it's 7.7, and it comes right there, so it's 7.70 feet below the top of casing, or 7.70 TOC. If I want to adjust for the depth to the land surface or below ground surface, I can take that tape, put the 7.70 at the land surface, being careful not to bend the tape, and then I can measure up, and I'll get this. It looks like about 5.12 feet below ground surface to the water is depth to water. And actually, you should read the tape as best you can to the nearest hundredth. But those of you that know about measurement theory know that means probably plus or minus a hundredth, right? The hundredths is estimated. Once you get the depth of water, you still have to roll the tape in. And this is the time when people often roll the tape in, but they let it slide across the casing. So you shouldn't do that. Hold the tape over and then roll the tape up. And also, another mistake that people commonly make is they let the tape all roll up in one spot. So, for instance, like this, you may be able to see I mostly rolled the tape up here on one side. And that is not good form because it means that the tape is not evenly wound on the reel. It makes it easy to tangle. So you'll see when I roll the tape, I kind of tip this back and forth so that it rolls all the way across the reel evenly. I put this in, set the brake, and I'm ready to go on to my next well. Putting the cap back on the well, and carefully I set it on there, and I gently set it down. I'm not going to push it on or hammer it on, it's completely unnecessary. You can see here, we're very fortunate. We have this pull tie here, and so we can just pull that off. Okay, it comes off very easily. If you don't have a pull tie like that, it's a little more difficult to get these off. You can see there's not a lot of space, but you have to get in there and you have to work that slowly off and bring it off. So it's really good to have this pull tie, but also that means when you put the cap back on, please, whether you have a pull tie or not, set it on very gently. Don't push it on or push it down. Just set it on there gently, and don't jam it on. Just gonna set it on there. put everything back the way I found it, and now I'm ready to get on to my next well. Okay? So here's an example of why you have to be a little bit careful. Sometimes when you're measuring wells, you can see these two piezometers have the same diameter, so it's not really that easy to tell which one is the deep and which one is the shallow. And typically students rely on the numbers. You can maybe see one of them is number 1 and one of them is number 2, but you have to keep in mind that it's not that hard for people to switch those caps. And so you need to find a way to make sure that you're actually getting the right measurement in the right well, because if you mix up and measure deep and shallow instead of shallow and deep, then that's going to mess up all your calculations. Also, you should keep in mind you can't depend on the depth of water. You have to find another way to figure out which well is the right well, which one's the deep and which one's the shallow, and that's part of your assignment. That's something that you have to think about and be able to do yourself. Here's another common problem that students often have in this well field. All the wells are supposed to be unlocked, but you can see here that this one apparently is locked, and sometimes students just take a look at this and just assume they can't get into it. This is actually one of your important wells that you need to measure, and so if you don't find a way to get this cap off, then you're going to miss out on some important data. So don't just take a look and just assume you can't get in. In fact, in this well, if you mess around with it a little bit, you'll see you can actually get that off without unlocking that. And there's your well. Be sure to put the cap back on when you're done. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how to measure depth of water in a well using an E-tape. And you'll have a chance to come out and practice on the wells out here. Part of that is going to be finding each of the wells that you need. And that is going to be a little bit of a challenge. I'm not going to lie to you. That's part of what you're out here to learn, because this is a very common thing that professionals have to deal with. Is you get a little map, and then you have a field like this, and you have to figure out where exactly is that well. And so that's part of the challenge that you're going to take on here. So I'm looking forward to that.